Good morning and welcome to today's Corporate Parenting Board on Tuesday, the 3rd of November. Can I say thank you to everyone who's attending today, because I know there are even more tasks and challenges with the latest COVID lockdown that's starting this week, but welcome everyone. Can I ask Lee, have we got apologies for people attending the board, please?
We do. We've received apologies from Councillor Allison, from Ophelia Ricks, Colleen Kenworthy, Sarah Miles, Christine Carmichael and Joanne Sanders.
Thank you very much. Could I also say that whilst Councillor Carol Pattison is with us, she has another important meeting to go to, so we'll be leaving partway through this meeting. Thank you for coming anyway and juggling her time. Lee, it would be really helpful if you could just list who is present at this meeting, please.
Okay, so we have yourself, Councillor Kendrick in the chair, Councillor Richard Smith, Councillor Carol Pattison, Jill Addy, designated nurse for looked after children, Julie Bragg, head of corporate parenting, Tom Brailsford, service director, Stuart Horn, head of joint commissioning, Barry Lockwood from Kirklees Fostering Network, Janet Tolley, the virtual school head teacher, Anna Gledhill, service manager for quality assurance. Councillor Marchington is here in an ex officio capacity. And if there are any board members who are present that I've missed off, if they could indicate now, but that's what I'm aware of, Chair.
Thank you very much. So welcome everyone. If we could move to item 2, please, which is minutes of the last meeting. And I'm looking to see if anybody has any issues or corrections for those minutes, and if there are any matters arising that we aren't going to address on the agenda as such. And it may be that I've missed it in the emails as such. We did say on page 4 that the statement of purpose for fostering service brochure would be circulated to board members and the fostering network. Has that happened and I've missed it, or has that not? Is that yet to happen?
Sorry, Councillor Kendrick. Yeah, that's yet to happen. I think what we've been doing is talking to Kirklees Fostering Network about co-producing a couple of things with them. One's the statement of purpose and the other one's the fostering handbook. So I think what we want to do is just go through that with them, revisit that in a kind of co-produced way, and then bring it back. So apologies, I should have informed you of that before the meeting.
Yeah, so that will be circulated eventually. That's fine. Are there any matters arising from the minutes? Anybody? No. Is everybody happy that those are an accurate record? Unless you tell me differently, I'm going to accept that that's agreed. Okay. We'll agree those minutes as an accurate record. There are no items on this agenda that aren't available to the public, so the whole of this meeting is in public. Lee, have we any deputations and petitions?
No deputations received, Chair.
Okay, and I do need to remind board members, if there are any items on the agenda in which they have a potential pecuniary interest, they need to declare them, and please complete the form and get it to Lee as soon as possible. Are there any public questions, Lee?
And no public questions received, Chair.
Thank you. So we move then to item 7, which is the Children's Services Highlight Report. And we have with us today Julie Bragg, who is going to help take us through that, and also Jill Addy, who will be addressing the health issues within that report. So over to you, Julie, if I may.
Good morning, everybody. So in terms of, I'm going to go 3 areas this morning: the children in care, the care leavers and the fostering service as part of the highlight report. So I think it's fair to say that with children in care, that our numbers of children in care have remained quite steady over the last 3 months. We had a slight decrease in September from to 687 on the previous month. We still and we continue to remain below our statistical neighbours in terms of our numbers of children in care. Sorry, it's what we have seen is another good news story is we're getting a decreasing number of children who are on care orders who live with their parents and what we call placement with parent regulations, and this continues to decrease in particular for the children who are subject to full care orders and who basically have had those in place for more than a year. So we are seeing reducing numbers. We are going back to court discharging the orders, which is a positive sign. Placement stability is a good news story, I think, in particular in these difficult times of COVID. We do know that there has been extra pressure on placements for children during the lockdown period and after. I think what it reflects is the decreases, is the good work that has continued from our placement support team and our supervising social workers in order to support carers in various settings, foster care and residential care, to maintain children living within their placements. We've had a good reduction in the changes of social workers for children in care in relation to a decrease in the numbers of changes that children have actually experienced during the last 2 months. An improving picture for our statutory visits. We've had from 91.6 in August to 93.1% in September. We continue to strive to achieve within this area, and monitoring goes on through 2 weekly performance meetings that are overseen by the service managers in the area. In relation to care leavers, so our care leavers, we've had a slight increase with regards to our personal advisors who are allocated to children in the age ranges of 17 years and 4 months. This is due to, we've had some movement within the service. We've had some personal advisors that have moved into other job roles, but I'm pleased to say now we have recruited to these posts, and we will be, in the next 2 weeks, we will be have a full complement of personal advisors in the service. So I'm very hopeful that this will see an improving picture once these people are in post, and that we are able to continue to allocate. In terms of in touch, again, an improving picture, the number of young people that we've been in touch with, albeit virtually or with face-to-face visits, often preferences of a young person, 18, which they prefer, but we've had a 4% improvement from September on our figures from August. Another improving picture is the number of young people who are living within suitable accommodation. We have had some difficulties during the lockdown period of young people who have turned 18 being able to move into their own accommodation in a timely manner. This has been due to a number of different reasons, in particularly with our houses within housing colleagues and some of the extra work that they've had to do in order to make their properties COVID ready. But again, we've seen an improving picture, and we currently have the majority of our young people now who are 18 are living in their own independent accommodation. Again, we've had an improving figure with regards to our employment, education and training figures. At the beginning of lockdown, we did see quite a dip in these figures. We were aware that a number of young people, for various reasons, through redundancy, furloughed, had a knock-on effect. So what we've done within the service to support our young people is we've introduced an extra weekly clinic that is run virtually by our careers advisor who sits within the service, and this I feel is an impact on why we've had that slight improvement. We do need to be mindful of the next 4 weeks, and again what impact that might mean on young people, and be mindful of what support services, extra support services need to be available. A good improvement in relation to the numbers of young people with pathway plan. What we were actually in the process of doing is pulling together plans to reopen our number 11 and number 12. And we had very clear plans in place, and we're hopeful that this would happen within the next 2 weeks. I think from what happened at the weekend, we're going to need to take some further advice from our public health officers in relation to whether we can continue with that plan. We are hopeful that we will be able to, but we will need to take further advice around that area. With regards to the fostering service, what is fair to say, I think there's been lots of work going on in the fostering service over the last few weeks. We've had a real focus on looking at our service, looking at how we can modernise our service, what we need to do to improve our service. We have had a deep dive into our recruitment process and looking at how we can make this a much leaner and much slicker process that we have in place, that we've had in place recently. We've had worked very closely. I've worked very closely with our colleagues in IT, Liquid Logic, where we are looking at how we have the tools from our performance colleagues and our system of Liquid Logic, which is a system we use in order to support us to be able to make these improvements. And we've really had quite a good shift, and we've now lots of things where we're able to have performance data available to us, which will help us all in our day-to-day jobs. We have currently 14 households who we are looking at within the assessment process, and in order to help with this process, we have increased our capacity in terms of social workers who are able to undertake these assessments so that we can complete within a timely manner. We've done lots of work at looking at the support that we give to our carers, our links, and working with other colleagues across the services to improve the placement support team and how this can link better with the supervising social workers and improve their working practices in terms of working with our foster carers. So these are all exciting things that are happening at the moment. Throughout the COVID period, myself and Tom and other colleagues have had regular meetings with the Kirklees Fostering Network in terms of looking at some of the issues that they've raised with us, which has given us a good insight into going away to looking and trying resolving some of those issues. So still work to do, but an increasingly positive picture. And as we move forward, I'm confident that we will see some really good improvements to our fostering service as we move forward over the next few months. Okay.
Thank you very much, Julie. I mean, it's good to hear about the extra investment in social workers to help speed up the fostering process, which I know is quite lengthy anyway, and anything that helps out with that. Just before we move on to Jill and the health bit, are there any particular questions colleagues have or comments you want to make? Go on, Barry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the email addresses. I was talking to my social worker yesterday and we still haven't got our email addresses for Kirklees. Right. We've got these new laptops, but I can't put an address on until I get a password. When is that going to happen?
Tom, do you want to?
Yeah, I just had my hand up. I'll just come in on that Barry. Thank you, and Councillor Kendrick. Yeah, the situation is obviously we're doing something quite innovative by rolling out Kirklees Council email addresses to foster carers, and there's been a number of complexities in the technology that sits behind that, Barry, which is why there's been a delay, and a lot of it's to do with Microsoft themselves. So our IT department have been liaising with Microsoft. My understanding is that when we rolled the laptops out, there was a group of people testing those for us. So that testing group, it should be this week, and I'll double check it today. The emails are ready for testing with that testing group this week. And then they'll be further rolled out. The other interesting thing is that IT are doing, Barry, is the functionality won't just be an email address. They're looking at a lot of the other Microsoft 365 functionality, like a SharePoint. And so, you're right, it's taken longer than we wanted it to. But actually, the solution we'll have in the end will be really, really good. And, things like, the COVID risk assessments that are needed to be undertaken with foster carers input. We've got plans once the email addresses are out that we can actually send those via email and get electronic signatures. And I think it'll really help things moving forward, but acknowledge it's taken longer than we wanted it to.
Just now I'm one of the testers, so I should expect something next week then.
I'd like to hear from you, Barry, if you haven't.
You will do.
That's absolutely fine.
Thank you.
Tom, you had your hand up separately as well, I think. No, you didn't. I think you gazumped me, Julie. One of my questions was about number 11 and number 12, but of course, it's all up in the air at the moment, isn't it, as to whether they can or can't open. I do know it's something that some of the young people, care leavers, have talked about being so important to them and them missing. So I'll cross my fingers, but of course it has to be done safely if it's done at all. Can I ask, and I don't know if it's Julie or Tom, we had during the previous lockdown some regulations that allowed fast track fostering. Are they still relevant or have they ceased?
No, they ceased. Council Kendrick on the 24th, 25th of September. And as Tom, I think, alluded to earlier on, we're working within the FE that was written in the 15th of October. I think it's fair to say that I don't think we're expecting those to change, but we are obviously closely watching in terms of any announcements from the government. But our mindset at the moment is that we're not expecting those to change, and that we are thinking about how we manage the service to make sure that we are within
business as usual, but getting it as
Yes.
smart as possible.
Yes.
Right. And just connect it. Sorry, Tom, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor. It's the other thing that we were hoping as well is that the easements actually taught us a lot about doing recruitment more quickly and using the Reg 24, and we were hoping there'd be some kind of national discussion about the length of recruitment and obviously the learning from COVID, but we await that, so we shall see.
I think people are busy in all sorts of departments at the moment, but I do think that's a goal not to be forgotten in the future, to speed that up. Just connected with fostering and adoption, are court hearings happening in a timely way? Are they backed up? Are we a waiting list?
Yes, yeah. We had a bit of a lull at the beginning, but we seem to be back up and running as business as usual. I mean, some of the things that we find are sometimes problematic is particularly when we're going back to court to discharge orders, particularly I made reference to children placement with parents regulations. But that has improved as time has gone on. There is a bit of a mixture of some people present and other virtual court hearings, but again within the courts it has been an improving picture and business as usual. Again, we'll just need to look in terms of what that might mean moving forward. In particularly around where we've had some that have been virtual, some where have been face to face, and whether that will change again. We'll need to be guided by the local courts around that.
Yeah, fine, thank you. And just one last comment, and I know it is a concern about the number of young people who aren't in education, employment and training, and it is about, I know the council has been looking at potential apprenticeships and work experiences, and particularly to target our care leavers. It's a bit about what we can do to get other employers to think about that, but probably now is not the best time because a lot of people are losing jobs anyway. So, but I think that's a target that we really need to keep fixed on. Tom, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry again, Councillor. It was just picking up on the points about the kind of DFE guidance that Julie was mentioned. I think it's just worth board noting that the same is for contact arrangements as well. So contact arrangements were virtual initially under COVID. We moved back to doing them face to face, and that's still the case because the DFE guidance hasn't been updated. And it's the same in terms of the DFE guidance. Is basically saying in terms of seeing children and foster care visits, that as it stands, that what we should be doing is prioritising face-to-face, but there are options to do them virtually. So we're working with I sent a letter out yesterday. We're working with individual foster carers on risk assessments and arrangements around those things. But if anything changes, obviously we'll update board with those changes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you would, as and when it happens, rather than waiting to the next meeting, I think would be really useful. I've tended to hog that rather, and I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to comment or ask a question. Jill, you've been so patient.
I'm on camera, you've got to behave, haven't you?
All right. You mean if you weren't on camera, you'd be doing cartwheels or something?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, you want to take us through the health aspects of things?
Yeah. I know that last time I was on leave and the annual health report was read out, and at the back of that was an update on what's been happening with the looked after team and the assessments. Just bearing in mind that this is September data, and although it's only a month or so ago, things have moved on quite a lot, but I'll refer to this and then update you on what's been happening more recently. So this data that you've got in front of you, the initial health assessment's done when a child comes into care within 20 working days. The local authority rolling data shows at 89.2%. That's because it's captured all year, but actually 100% of them were done in September in timescales, but that obviously doesn't show on the Kirklees data there. No. It's still very challenging. The clinics are still not open to allow us to go in, so the paediatricians have been doing these health assessments themselves over the phone and over video if the social worker can help with that. The nurses, as usual, do all the prep, which is an amazing job really, because we're able to go back to that initial health assessment form throughout the child's stay in care, because it has all the history on and it's really comprehensive. So the nurses have continued to do that, because otherwise the paediatricians absolutely wouldn't have been able to get all that information on ready. So it's good that they've carried on doing that. I'm having a call this afternoon. It's our big meeting call to see where we are with clinics and whether actually that's going to be opening again. The nurses actually didn't have time to go and work in any clinics anyway, because they've had to do all the health assessments up till the end of September and a lot of October. But I'll tell you about that in a minute. So the review health assessments, your data actually in the council looks not bad at all. It isn't as good as that, and that's again because it's a rolling programme. So we're taking all the best bits for the 12 months, and that's what you're seeing. The actual reality of the month of September was that 55% of under fives and 60% of over fives were done in timescales. And that means if it was due on the 10th of September, that it was done in that month by the 10th of September. Now, if you're sharing this out with the community nurses, as we normally do, they do up to about 48% of these throughout the year. There was only my 2.6 nurses able to do this. There's no way they could get them all done on the actual date, because a lot of them would have been due in the first half of the month. What I can tell you is that 96% of them were done within that month by my 2.6 nurses. And the only reasons that they won't have been is literally they're trying to get them in that month. And they were done very, very shortly after any that just passed over. It might have only been one or two that passed over. Things have moved on a bit since then. We did, although nurses in the community, through quite a long part of it, have been able to go out and make visits, because of the shortage of nursing support to us and the amount of assessments we had to do, which is about 70 a month. My nurses, although they could have gone out and done face-to-face, they couldn't because of the time element, because of all the travelling. So they did do them all virtually, that's over the phone, from May to September. Then we started to go back out, and that is because we started to get some of the community nurses back to start helping us. They were out of their statutory jobs, so they started to come back in September, October, and we were assured that by October we would definitely have some help, which we have, and we shared them. We shared the review health assessments with the nurses in the community, although the looked after nurses kept the lion's share of that, because we did realise that people were coming back to their substantive jobs and they would have a lot of catching up to do as it was. But come November, we've divided up the assessments as usual, like we would. So I'm hoping that we will have almost all face-to-face then, and hopefully done in time scales, but we do have to be careful that people are coming back to their normal jobs, and it will be quite tricky for them to do them by the exact date. We do have some carers ask us not to go if they are isolating or whatever. We're trying to keep a track of any carers, or for any reason that we can't do a face-to-face. We have full PPE available to us. So they are getting, after this, I think October was 100% of them were done in October, within the month of October. Now the dental checks is the real tricky one for us, and registering with a dentist. The dental checks, the data from Kirklees is showing at 64.8, but that is based on what we know and is on a rolling 12-month programme, so actually it's going to probably be less than that. As we know, all the dental checks stop from April, including all the ones for our children. And I have asked, I've been in touch with NHS England originally, and then they passed me down to Kirklees Dental Commissioner to ask if our children care leavers could be made a priority. But it was categorically that no, they couldn't, because there were other vulnerable groups that needed urgent dental care as well, and that's where the service had to go. Now, we didn't know how long this was going to go on for. I suppose we were hoping that by now we'd be back into foster carers being able to ask their dentists for dental checks again, but seemingly this is not the case. I'm assured every time that if any child has dental pain and needs emergency treatment, obviously like everybody in the community, they will be able to access that service. But that isn't what we count or what we check. My worry is more about the ones that are coming into care, and that's where they registered with a dentist. This is something that the data is not collected by the local authority, it's collected by Locala, and I'm worried that these children who come into care with already dental problems are not even getting registered at the moment, and I would like a conversation about how we can maybe ask for that to happen. I mean, we have about, 30 children come into care every month. It varies, but we need those children registering, even if they can't actually go for a checkup at that moment in time. I am thoughtful that somebody the other day, we've got some children placed in Bradford who were new into care, and they could get their dental care if it was paid privately for. Now, that is not something that really should, we should have to consider. So where that's going, I don't know with the Bradford. I've spoken to the social worker, but that's really not fair that if private can go ahead, but NHS can't. So the children that are coming in under 5 there are shown a dramatic downward trend from the 100% that we had in June who were registered with a dentist, and that'll be because of the new into care and move placements where they need a dentist. The substance misuse, that's always very low here. It's very hard to capture, as you know. We know there's 2 individuals that account for that 0.4%. That is really significant support that's required. But we do know a lot of young people do use substances, and every single one is offered a service if that's what we know that they do. So where we go from here at the moment, all the health assessments are being done face-to-face, unless somebody asks us not to. Even now that the things have changed, we'll still carry on, because as long as we can keep the community nurses with us, we'll be okay. And we do know that NHS England have said that the health visitors and school nurses and ourselves should not be moved again and redeployed onto the front line. So I did get our nurses back within a couple of weeks, because myself and a 0.8 nurse just could not do the service on our own. So hopefully we will keep those nurses. I mean, it's a moving picture, and I suppose it depends where we go with COVID, but we are assured that we should keep our nurses this time. I'm waiting for the data coming next week to show how October's gone, and I'm hoping that everything will start to come a bit better, but I think it's the dental checks that will be the most tricky for us. I've had a look at the January figures, December and January health assessments. Now, they are always quite large, and we have got over 90, I think we've got 95 review health assessments due in January, which is just so difficult to get it done in time. They're up from last year. We did last year move some into December, and then some of December's into November's to try and ease everything, and then COVID happened. Any child, the only health assessments that we didn't do through all this time, actually in a very comprehensive way, was April's, and we had about 70 in April. But what we did do was we talked to every foster carer during April, and any that we felt were needed to be seen, we've put them in between May and November. And all those young people, there was about 14 to 16 of them that actually needed to be seen because they were becoming 18, so they wouldn't be having another one, or their health needs were such that we thought we should see them. And all the under fives that were due in April will have been seen now by October and November. So there's just a few that are going round to April that weren't seen, but they all did get that discussion with the foster carer. Has anybody got any questions?
I'm not seeing anything. I have to say the registration with a dentist issue and being able to get dental checks just appears to be such a hard nut to crack.
We're not going to see positive results on this data for a long time, because obviously we ask at the health assessment. So as the year goes by, we will be asking, and if they've not been, it's going to be a negative and negative. I'm just wondering if there's anything that we can do, commissioning wise. I have no idea, to actually get the ones that have come into care to be able to even register. I think that would be a tick.
A big start, yes.
So that then when the dentists open and say, OK, right, you and I can also go for our checkups and our children can go, that they're already registered. Whereas we're going to be so far behind if then they've got to start registering. So I don't know if we can think about that. Stuart and Tom, I don't know. We haven't had a chance to have a discussion about it. That's my biggest worry because of the dental problems for children. So this dental data isn't going to look good for quite some time.
Okay, Stuart, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I agree, Jill. It is a concern, something that we should really take up with the dental commissions and CCG to try and make that happen.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been a lone voice on this purely because we didn't know how long it was going to last, and obviously everybody's in a very difficult position. So I have gone to the right people alone to do this, but I think it's bigger than me, and I think it needs to be something that would come as a Kirklees request rather than a designated nurse request, because I don't think my voice was loud enough. Although I did try.
I'm sure you did, Jill. Tom.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth flagging it with Penny Woodhead from the CCG from a quality perspective, Stuart, as well, because it's actually about the quality of service, isn't it? And then, seeing what we can do in terms of, if that doesn't work, talking to Carol McKenna about how she can influence NHSE.
Yeah, I was a bit confused about you saying you were passed to the local commissioner, Jill, because I just understood it was NHS England who commissioned dentistry.
Yeah, but I think we've got a local commissioner. So I spent it were a few weeks getting passed from pillar to post with people being on leave and one thing and another. And then I did get through to our local commissioner, which is, I've been asking for a long time for our dental, our children in looked after to be actually put on their strategy that was written in 2019. It was in draft, and I'm still waiting for it being our young people being put on there as a priority. So I have been in touch with these people in the past. I did ask for an update last week from the local commissioner, and I haven't had a response, but of course she might be on leave or something. But I think we need to, I know that there's a lot of priorities, but the dental care is just going to be so bad for the children coming into care. Like I say, maybe we've got a bit of leeway with the others, but into care, dental is terrible. They haven't been to the dentist for many, many years, a lot of them, and we need them seeing, even if it's just once, just for a register and a one check. And they're in massive numbers here.
No. So is this local commissioner part of NHS England or part of the CCG? That's the bit that's confusing me.
Tom, do you know?
I don't. Let's pick it up outside, Councillor Kendrick, because my understanding was the same as yours. I thought, maybe there's an NHSE commissioner embedded in the CCG, but Stuart will pick it up and investigate. And
okay,
we'll back.
so we'll undertake to follow this up, and I'd like some feedback on it, as I'm sure Jill does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Lovely.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? No. So I'm assuming that we're happy to accept this report and thank each of you, Julie and Jill, for your contributions and the presentation of that. Can we move on to item 8, therefore, which is the Virtual School Head Teacher Report 2019-2020, which I think that's you, Janet.
Yeah, good morning. Could I apologise in advance? I'm being asked to authenticate my connection, so I don't know. That's why I've got my phone.
Right.
Sometimes
disappear on us then.
Yeah, so I apologise. I think I've just managed to sort it. I had a message come through. I think I've done it. Yeah, I wouldn't normally be picking up my phone in a corporate parenting board meeting, but if I didn't, I could have disappeared. So good morning, everybody. I'm hopefully this morning just going to take you through the headlines from the Virtual School Head Teacher Report. As we've been hearing this morning, we're working in very unusual times. And at the moment, this report actually has information in it from 2019 to 20, but also 2018 to 19, where we've not been able to add to the picture because of the COVID situation. So just to recap, schools did go into full lockdown at the end of March, so things were very different for our children and young people throughout that term and a lot of the summer term. So where the information is for 18-19, it should be clear, and where it's for 19-20 and been updated, that should also be clear. We have no outcome data, so things like Key Stage 2 SATs results, but we do have teacher assessment GCSE information, which I've taken into consideration. That is yet to be validated, but is the information that we've got through from schools. So it's not a normal, usual situation for the head teacher report, but we've added the previous one in the best way that we can. So if we start on page 26 and 26 through to 29, that gives a position statement really about where the virtual school is. The last time the work of the virtual school was externally validated was when we had the Ofsted visit in June 2019, which I suppose is almost at the end of the last full operational academic year. And then I've updated the context with the information in July 2020 at the end of that initial period of COVID support and working. I have presented to Corporate Parenting Board before the work that we were doing, so I'm not intending reading through all of this bit for you, but really it was around what were we doing for our children and young people, how were we supporting them, whether they were attending school as part of the vulnerable young persons offer, or whether they were working at home, and how we were working with other professionals to risk assess that situation and to support them with the work that we were doing. And as you will know, some young people then did go back into school for some of the summer term prior to the summer holidays. So the data in here is updated as of the last date of the summer term now. So that will be different from the reports that you've seen before. We were talking about how many additional digital devices, for example, we'd provided. We've also worked with the fostering services team, and iPads and laptops have also been issued to young people through that. I think the main thing for us in terms of our way of working was that we were able to get resource to young people where they were quite efficiently and effectively because of the system that we use. So schools request funding very specific targets, and they then provide. So where we got youngsters out of area, we were able to support them as we are with young people in area. And where schools weren't able to for any reason, actually social workers were also able to step up, for example, if they were visiting a young person and purchasing and buying laptops. So we think that worked really well. We then move on, I think, really into, as a result of that, what concerns did we have moving forwards? And really it was about transition. So our focus since the end of the summer term has been, how do we support and enable our young people to return to nursery and school and college? You know, bearing in mind that each of those young people are individuals. Some would have been more unsettled or worried about going back to school than others. What we found initially was 98% of our school-age children were back in school in that first week in September. So we were really positive, and actually the reflections from my team have been really positive throughout the whole of last half term around the resilience of our young people, and actually how many of them have settled back into school in an appropriate way. One of the things that we have noticed, though, and it will come of no surprise to you, is that as we went through the term, there were young people who were having to self-isolate or whose bubbles were closed. In the first couple of weeks, the numbers were quite low, but then, I mean, it was fluctuating between sort of the 30s, and actually in one of the weeks we had 67 youngsters who for some reason were not actually physically in school. They had what's called an X code, and that might have meant that their bubble was closed, or they were self-isolating, or they had a positive COVID test. So what we're doing is we're working with schools and carers and social workers when that's the case, to double check that the support is there from the school and that the young people can access what is being offered by the school if they're having to work at home. And also trying to keep an eye on if that's happened more than once. I think we've had at least one young person now where they had to go home for 2 weeks, then they went back into school, somebody else tested positive that they'd been near, and then they were home working again. So I think we need to find ways of looking at the cumulative impact of the current situation on our children and young people. Now, you will be aware at the moment that schools, colleges, nurseries are staying open. The information coming from government is that things will be carrying on, and this will be open for our young people, but we're still waiting for guidance, really, for example, around clinically vulnerable young people and what the position may or may not be with shielding, and we'll need to work together across service where that's the case. If we need to move back into risk assessment processes and monitoring the situation in a different way. But I think, the announcement was only at the weekend. We're all awaiting further guidance. Julie and Tom were talking about guidance from October. We've no new guidance around some of those issues at all at this stage. So I think we just have to wait and see. I think we have worked really well across service. One of the positives, if you like, is that the team are all working virtually, so there's no travel time. So we're able to be involved in more meetings about young people, and actually, the number of PEP meetings that are happening and being reported on in a timely manner has increased. So I suppose that every cloud has a silver lining, if you like, and the teams and the social workers are managing to have those discussions. In every single one of those discussions, we are really focusing on the what ifs. If this young person is not able to attend school, what will happen? What will the school provide? Who will be in contact? Is there everything at home that is needed to enable and support moving forwards? But it's very much a movable feast. So the first few pages of the report there were around what we did until the summer. And that's a brief verbal update really on where we are over the last half term. The rest of the head teacher document really is, as you would expect, the business as usual. So in spite of everything that's going on then, well, what impact has the virtual school been able to have? And what are the key challenges moving forwards? So there's a summary of that on page 30, the evidence of impact, page 31 and 32, our key challenges, and you'll see that the very first one there is the impact of the lockdown, the ongoing issues in terms of missed education, and actually the emotional health and well-being of our young people, and how we can work with everybody around those young people to try. They're calling it, aren't they, the, in inverted commas, the catch-up curriculum. They're making sure that we do everything that we can. And then finally, what our priorities are around. It's what our job is, really, isn't it? Making sure that young people are in a provision that meets their needs, making sure that all the professionals are working together around their education planning. And we still have the outcome focus around primary, the outcomes at the end of Key Stage 2. So if you were to strategically look at the local authority data matrix, you'll see and everything in the around the outcomes, we are at or above national for children and young people in care in all areas. In fact, in Key Stage 4, we're well above, except Key Stage 2. So we are still, focusing in on every primary meeting around the specifics around reading, writing and maths. We have something called the letterbox programme, where packages are delivered home, which again have really come into their own during COVID. We've had the library service working to produce a video for carers as to how they can support young people with their literacy and their reading using these packs. So in terms of, if we were a real school looking at the outcomes of our young children, the focus area would be the as early intervention as possible, so that young people achieve as well as possible at the end of Key Stage 2. We do seem to do some catching up later on, but that's our main outcome focus area. I think I'm sure that you'll have all read through. So is it appropriate to say any questions rather than going through every bullet point on it?
I think so. Any questions or comments? And I think Barry's got his hand up first.
Yeah, page 27, just at the bottom there, the 3 young people not on a school roll. Has that been resolved now?
For all but one young person where there are complex issues, and at the moment that young person is being educated at home. It tends to roll on and off with another young person at the moment who is on a school roll in Kirklees but is out of area. So we're trying to get her a school roll out of area. Over a year, we do have young people who have a period of time not on a school roll, and that's one of our first priorities to address. It has been slightly more difficult, if I'm honest, during the COVID situation, trying to get the meetings in with people, for examples in admissions or in schools, but it's something that we monitor very carefully and very closely, and we do report on the percentages within a time scale. So actually in the previous report around the educational outcomes, there was the detailing for September. So there were 28 young people who moved during September. So at a time where they wouldn't, it's not a transition to secondary school or something like that. But so there were 28. Out of those, 89.3% happened with no break in provision at all. So we were able to work with everybody to move from one school to another with a planned and careful transition with no break. 96.4 were in the statutory timescale of 20 working days. So you see, it's a very small number where we go over that period of time. But where we do, we work to ensure that there is some work provided for that youngster, and our role is to expedite as much as possible the processes that may be holding up that for the young person.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, Councillor Patterson, have you any comments that you want to make about the virtual school report as it features highly in your world?
No, I haven't. I think Janet, as ever, has done a very good job at presenting this. I mean, just to say that it is, I mean, for all schools, it's a challenging time, but I mean, I think for the virtual school, it's even more challenging in many ways, because there's so many different facets to the work that they have to do. And of course, it's not all contained within one building. So I just have to commend Janet and her staff for the work that they do, especially, I say, in this challenging time. Thanks.
Thank you. Is it worth also saying, Councillor Pattison, that we have been through in detail this report at the virtual school governing body?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Could I ask a question, please, Janet? On page 27, there's a bullet point that said 42 young people have requested that they continue to access additional one-to-one tuition remotely. Is that because they feel that's the better way that they learn, or is it they're trying to catch up?
Okay, so this was during the lockdown and the partial opening of some schools, and actually some of the tuition services were providing this kind of service. So where that then goes back to face-to-face, they will have gone back to face-to-face. We are finding more and more requests for one-to-one tuition through a variety of models. Sometimes with the school staff, you know, the teacher in school who teaches them that subject, often through providers. And I think it's something for us to keep an eye on, because there are more and more providers becoming available. Schools are being given funding for catch up for all young people. And one of the things that we need to be mindful of is that we complement anything that is available at school. And actually, where we do have funding through Pupil Premium Plus and tuition is in place, if that's meeting the young person's need, it actually frees up some of the other funding that's going directly to school for other vulnerable young people. So, yeah. Okay, I think it's important to note that young people do want to be engaged in the one-to-one tuition. They clearly find it useful.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that we found with our Year 11 results this year was that whilst level 4 and above, 5 subjects, including English and maths at level 4 and above, maintained a good percentage, at 5 and above, so the higher grades, we didn't have as many young people getting that across a large number of subjects. And we actually think that that's because many of our young people, especially the more able, are benefiting from that extra support just before they go into a GCSE exam. So maybe from January through to the GCSEs, you know, they maybe come a bit later to the idea, or they're in a position and say, no, I really want to do well in my exams. I know I've got some catching up to do, and really focus with that. And that wasn't available in schools in the way that it has been in the past. And of course, they didn't do an exam. The teacher assessment of them was really where they were at Christmas, or where they thought they would achieve had they carried on working like that. So I think that's something for us to see if anything comes out of that nationally.
Yeah, indeed. I've finally tracked down, I could see a hand up, and I now know it's Councillor John Lawson. John.
Thank you, Viv. Thank you, Janet, for the report. Very welcome. It addresses pretty much all the questions I had as I opened it. each of them became apparent, so that was really that was really good to see. I was especially concerned with attainment gap, and to see what we were doing there. And I'm kind of reassured that we're, you know, through Premium Plus, then that Pupil Premium Plus, then we're addressing some of those issues, and we're doing our best to plug those gaps, which is really reassuring. One of the things that you did mention there that I was going to bring up was things like guidance on shielding and shielded pupils, and how that was an issue in the first lockdown, and we probably have a list of things like that were a problem in the first lockdown that we can petition, if we like, to say, can we have some early guidance on this, please? And I'm just thinking, of that list, where would you petition? Where would you want us, or can we help in petitioning and saying, look, this went a little bit late last time. Can we speed this up, please? I was just wondering whether there's anything that this panel can do. Or
I think it's a really good question, and I'm not sure. We had this discussion, the learning leadership team yesterday, around how our risk assessment processes worked and lessons that we might learn about streamlining some of that work. I think at the moment we are my understanding is that young people would be attending school and that there is no update around shielding produced yet. So we have to be mindful of people's concerns and work around individual young people, and work with their carers and with their social workers. But it's difficult for us to do that until the national guidance is available.
Can I just come in? Is that all right, Councillor Kendrick?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. My understanding, Councillor Lawson, is that when you look at the 5th of November guidance, it talks about the extremely clinically vulnerable. And my understanding is that the government will be writing to the extremely clinically vulnerable in terms of saying that they need to take extra precautions, but there won't be any extra support like they were under the shielding guidance. And I think that particular group is a very specific group with cancer treatments, bone marrow, that really extremely clinical vulnerable group. So I think that would apply to a certain number of our children. I think what I would welcome further guidance on is the group underneath that we used to call, for want of a better term, the kind of flu jab group. People who were eligible, because of asthma, all that kind of thing. And I think it's as Janet's alluding to, it's very difficult at the moment. We need to obviously take as much precautions as we can, but until the guidance is released, it's very, very difficult. But I would welcome some clarity on that, as I'm sure Janet would.
I think, if I can just come back in, Chair, I think it's really good to see that we're thinking like that, and that's how we're looking forward to that information being available. I do think that the report shows actually we seem to be in quite a good place, that we've embedded some practice that puts us in good stead for the coming sort of month or so, and that's really nice to see. But yeah, that guidance, let's have it as quickly as possible. That's not speaking to you, Jenna, I'm speaking to government, of course. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else with a comment or whatever? No, I just want to say, just picking up the key stage 2 attainment, and I know one of the things you said you're doing is encouraging as many of the cohort as possible to take up their entitlement. But I suppose the issue is where children weren't in care at that young age and then come into care but missed out on that education, that they're always playing catch up, and they could well be in that key stage 2 cohort who underperform. Absolutely. And that is a problem. But I think that's a right approach in encouraging. My worry is that so many of the sort of private nurseries and childminders and so on are struggling, particularly now we're going into another lockdown, because a lot of parents aren't using them anymore because they're at home, and finance and all the rest of it, So I think that is going to be a huge challenge. What we can do more than you've listed, I don't know, but I think it's something we should keep our eye on and keep striving to improve. But if there are no more questions or comments, can I say thank you very much, Janet, for that report. As usual, it's a full and comprehensive report that gives us a lot of information and helps us understand really well. So if I could move us on then, please, to item 9, which is the Children's Rights Team report, and I believe that Melanie Tiernan and Anna Gledhill are going to take us through this report, one or both, or
Morning.
Yeah. Morning. Yes, I've arrived. I've zoomed in at some point, Councillor Kendrick, during the meeting, and I'm here. I've arrived. I've landed. So yeah. So I'm just going to take you through the report, but my manager Anna Gladhill is here as well. So hi Anna. So yes, I'm presuming that I'm Melanie Tiernan, manager of the Children's Rights team, for anybody that doesn't know me. And as Janet said with her report, I'm assuming that everybody's seen the report. So you might have some questions either as we're going through or at the end, but I'm just going to kind of just highlight a few of the main areas really going through. So just looking at the annual report, which covers from 2019 through to the end of March 2020. If you look at page 47 on the papers that are there, you'll see that the graph there shows that advocacy for children that are looked after and care leavers still continue to be the highest proportion of the work that we do, which is not surprising. That's the statutory work for which our service was first set up, although it's expanded since then to do lots of other things. On page 49, that continues to show on a graph there that 66% of the advocacy work that we undertake is about supporting children and young people at their reviews. So that's their 6-monthly review that they have. So 66% of our work is involved in ensuring that they're prepared for their reviews and that they are able to have a say in that review and that their voice is heard. Also on page 49, at section 7.3, you will see there that it shows that 79 children and young people living outside of Kirklees were supported with advocacy as well. So obviously they're some of our most vulnerable young people. And more than half of those felt that they'd achieved a positive outcome from the advocacy that they'd received, be that support at their review meetings or other issues. It's fair to say that where children live and their time with their family and friends, which used to be referred to as contact, but we now moving to call it family time, or issues with their social worker or personal advisor, continue to be the main themes that come out in advocacy. At page 50, at point 7.11, you'll see there that it says 50% less issues were raised that year through the formal complaints process. So there were only 23 issues raised through the complaints process. So that's an indication, I think, really, that more issues are being resolved informally, more talking at a level when young people just do come to us for advocacy support. But in terms of the complaints, you'll see on your agenda that Anna is going to be talking about the complaints report later on, so she'll probably shed more light on that. Yeah. Page 51, section 8.2 shows that we've undertook more child protection advocacy in that year than the previous year due to being fully staffed. We still weren't able to see every young person, but at least that number had increased. And on page 53, there are some examples there of verbal and written feedback that we've had from children and young people who continue to give us positive feedback from the service that they receive. On page 56, there's some information about the Children in Care Council and Care Leavers Forum, and you'll see that they continue to meet and they were involved in a number of activities and consultations, such as they were involved with the review of the fostering service. So managers came to them to meet with them and discuss their ideas. They had some input into the health assessments. Jill came and spoke to them about that. And they also took part in some regional events of other members of other regional children in care councils and enjoyed a visit to Huddersfield University as well. And on page 58 onwards, that's the data with regard to the independent visitors scheme. At the end of March 2020, there were 43 trained volunteers with 41 children and young people who were matched. And there's lots of graphical information on that. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions on that, on the annual report. I mean, I'm going to go on to talk about the 6-monthly report, which is a little bit more up to date than the annual report, being that finished at the end of March. Are there any questions on the annual report, or shall I just carry on with the... Any questions or comments? No? Not seeing anything. Can I just say that, you know, 43 trained volunteers is really, really good. But, you know, this is a public meeting. I doubt there are crowds of people watching, but it is actually something I think that's hidden and unknown to most members of the public, that you could spend some time and contribute really well to a young person by becoming an independent visitor for the service. Tom, you wanted to comment on that?
I just to echo what you were saying, Councillor Kendrick. You know, when I first started going around the services that were in my area and finding out exactly what they did, and I've been around Kirklees a long time, I didn't fully understand what the independent visitors scheme was, and actually the fact for our children that it's often the only person in their life who isn't paid to be in their life. I think it's just such a valuable scheme, and I'd welcome any further volunteers to it. I think it's great. Yeah, I do, absolutely. Anna, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, just to expand on that, and Mel will cover it in the 6-monthly update around perhaps some of the challenges that COVID has unfortunately given for independent visitors in terms of visiting, not visiting, and the restrictions. But the independent visitor coordinator is actually currently working on developing a way to train independent visitors online, because training used to be in person, and seeing if we can recruit more in terms of more of a virtual recruitment session. That's something that is in process.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, bizarrely, I had a phone conversation with somebody who used to work for the authority and is now retired, and they were talking about what they might like to do and things. And I mentioned the independent visitor scheme, and they had no idea it existed, and are really quite interested. And you just think, why aren't we just telling everybody who retires from the council, who retires as a foster carer, Barry? I know you're not doing now, but you know. But do you know what I mean? That there is an audience out there that we could at least inform, you know, in the hope that we could develop further. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
If you want to continue, yeah.
No, that's fine. So if we go on to look at the 6-monthly report for the children's rights team as a whole, so that covers from the 1st of April through to the end of September this year. So if we just start on page 70, page 4.1, you'll see information about the opportunities that have arisen and good practice that's happened, but also the challenges of the service between the 1st of April and the 30th of March. Between the 1st of April and end of September, in particular, relation to the coronavirus situation and how we've dealt with that. The service has embraced the virtual world, as I think everybody has, and tried to engage more effectively, and have been able to do so really in continuing to support children and young people at their review meetings and at the child protection conferences to just ensure that the voice of the child is still heard. So there's been obviously all virtual meetings up to now, and advocates have been attending those, and some young people have attended as well, but not all. Contact with children and young people has been also maintained although initial contact with them subject to a child protection conference is more difficult because obviously we've not met this young person before, so trying to engage with yet another professional over the telephone, or even if you've got a video call, is much harder for them. So when restrictions were lifted and we were able to, we prioritised those as face-to-face visits to try and be able to get more effectively their voice. Every visit is risk assessed, whether that's for child looked after advocacy or child protection advocacy, and obviously who knows what, I'm sure decisions are being made as we speak about visits going forward, but everything is risk assessed anyway. The team introduced a weekly challenge for children and young people. So we asked them to do various activities and email us in pictures or videos of what they'd been doing. And that was for them to take part in throughout the lockdown. So that gave them something to do, but it also enabled us to be engaged with some young people who have never used our service before. So we used our various social media platforms. So it was on our website, was the details, but we also emailed out to carers and the KFN, and it was also on our Twitter and Instagram pages and our Facebook page, so that lots of people could see that. And we had some lovely things sent in, and there was an article about it on the internet. I don't know if people saw it, but there was a bit of a summary of what had happened with the challenge. And as I say, the Twitter and Instagram pages, the Instagram was introduced, and we've been able to keep the social media much more up to date with relevant information. So that seems to be going quite well. If we move down to page 72, looking at section 5, you can see there that the team has provided support to children and young people for 271 advocacy issues, and 108 of these were, again, for some of our most vulnerable who live outside of Kirklees. And the summary at section 6 on page 74 also shows the most common theme for advocacy, even in this 6 months, is still the same as they were for the previous 6 months, really, around where they live in, family time and issues with regard to social worker or personal advisor. And in this 6 months period, we've just supported 15 issues to be dealt with through the formal complaints procedure. And most of the young people felt that they'd either got a positive outcome from that, or at least they'd got a compromise to move forward. Moving on to page 76 at section 8.1. That shows that 82 children and young people received support for their views to be heard at a child protection conference, 28 of which were for initial conferences, because we do, once we pick up and support a young person at initial conference, we go the whole way through, so we do all their reviews as well. So unfortunately, due to capacity, that there are a further 26 young people that we were unable to offer that to. On page 77 at section 9.5, again, it talks about the Children in Care Council and Care Leavers Forum, who have continued to meet virtually. One of the biggest challenges has been the technology. We've been using Skype for quite a while, and we've just moved on to Microsoft Teams, which is working a little better, actually. Skype was throwing them in and out all the time and was a bit of a nightmare, but we have moved to Microsoft Teams, which has been better. Some young people have decided they don't want to join the groups anymore, or meet with the groups until it goes face to face, so that was a bit of a challenge. We do keep them updated with emails and try to get them to be interested, but although we think young people are on technology all the time, some of them just didn't want to engage in that way. However, we did get some young people who have joined the group, particularly the Children in Care Council, but also the Care Leavers Forum, someone from out of area as well. So that's been really good that he's been able to take part, and we're hoping to increase that going forward. Those that do meet are enthusiastic, and they've taken part in discussions about developments such as the Mockingbird Project, updating of literature, and their views on what it's like to be in care. A bit sad that the music project can't be finished off because of the COVID restrictions. We keep looking at it and trying to get that sorted in some way, but we keep being thwarted, unfortunately.
This is the RAP project.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And they've got so far, it's basically down to the recording now, really. But it's, with all the coronavirus restrictions, it's really hard to get it so that all young people can be involved. But we hopefully get it sorted next year if we can't get it finished off this year. So moving on to the independent visitors report, on page 85 through to page 87, again, it outlines the good practice and challenges that were faced by the coronavirus situation. And obviously one of the most challenges has been that young people and their independent visitor can't meet face to face, but we've had a lot of really good examples of independent visitors staying in touch with their young people via cards and letters, but also doing things over video call, sorting out quizzes and that kind of thing. And so the majority of them have kept in touch, or sending craft items. One sent a pair of socks in the post. So they've done really well at trying to keep in touch and trying to keep that relationship built, really. Over this reporting period, we have had some volunteers who have had to relinquish their roles due to the personal reasons or their employment reasons. So at the moment, we have got 14 young people who are on the waiting list to be matched with a volunteer. And
even
so
more good reason for us to
yeah. So as Anna said, and I need to update Anna as well on this, but the coordinator and I had a discussion yesterday, so he's shown me the initial work that's been done around getting the training into some kind of virtual package that people can do either as a one-to-one or as a group to just finish off, really. So works on with that, and then we'll be looking at, because most of the advertisements that we do is obviously virtual these days anyway. In the olden days, might I say, when we used to do the Kirklees together that went out to every household, that always brought in our biggest applicants from that source. And I know it's done now and it's done online. So we're starting initial discussions about how we can move forward with that. So that's it from me, unless anybody's got any questions.
Any questions or comments, colleagues? Barry?
Yeah, I'm just looking at page 77, the exit questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
I know because of COVID, but can't that be done online? Because you just said that they're on social media all the time.
I mean, it's something we can look at. That's a task that we undertake on behalf of the Leaving Care team, just to provide that independence, really. So it's actually for the Leaving Care team to be able to assess if a young person needs some further support before they actually leave care, and to look at the services. But it's something we can look at, Barry. I mean, I think like a lot of things, they still prefer the face-to-face. They still prefer us to go out. But it's a good point. Thank you. We can look at that.
Yeah. Good point, Barry. Yeah. On a similar vein, on the same page, it was interesting when you talked about, I don't know if it was the Care Leavers Forum or a Children and Care Council meeting, that a young person from out of area was able to join in because it was online. And I do remember being at one Children and Care Council where somebody did join us on somebody's iPad who couldn't be there. And it strikes me that some young people like that online engagement, others like the present engagement. And I think planning for the future, the challenge might be, or I might put the challenge out there, Mel, that every Care Leavers Forum or Children Care Council has both elements in it. So there's a screen up so that anybody coming in virtually can, and people who want to be present, and I understand that, are all there together, because I think we should be trying to provide for both
Definitely.
preferences, really.
Yeah, definitely. It's what we call, I think, is it Mel's word, this blended approach. Hybrid and blended seem to be the two words that are around, and I like blended better. I think it sounds nicer. So yeah, we are definitely wanting to look at that blended approach, and as you say, we thinking at one point was to set up an out of area forum, which might have its own benefits and merits in some point, because young people out of area have particular issues to them. But as you say, we've already identified that, you know, actually we need that blended where they can at least come together some of the time, if not all of the time, as one group to share their ideas. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. Tom?
Yeah, it's just in preparation for that blended approach, Mel and Anna. I know one of the issues when we've tried to do it, particularly in the leadership meeting room in Civic Centre 3, is it doesn't work very well with the big screens. And I asked Sarah to do some work in terms of preparing for child protection conferences needing to be blended. And I'm just, you know, it might just be worth thinking in preparation, if you need any equipment this year, there is some funding I've got to be able to do that. So if you need some decent
get your bids in,
have a think about it.
Yeah, and I'll speak to Rachel Fairhurst, the manager of the Child Protection Review Unit, because she's highlighted the approach they're going to be taking. So yeah, Mel, we'll have a conversation about that. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
That's really good. Anybody else? No? If we move on then, and it's the, oh, I've lost my place now. Help me out with the page number, somebody. Are we on to item 12, page 89?
We are, Chair, yeah. Annual complaints report.
Yeah. So are you doing this, Anna?
Yes, I am indeed. So I'm covering for Helen Sanderson, who's the complaints manager. She's on leave. So yeah, good morning. So I'm presenting the headlines from the annual complaints report. So the Compliments and Complaints Unit, it covers children's social care, and I manage the complaints service and the complaints managers. So when I'm talking about this, it feels a little bit out of date, because the reporting period doesn't actually cover the COVID period, or really the impact of COVID, because it is April to March. On a side note, COVID has been a really challenging time for the team. I think contacts have increased to the team just as a point of call to the local authority, really. Anyway, in terms of the report, so you should have had an opportunity to read the report. So I'll share the main themes. I'll start on page 96, which is an overall summary. So you'll see that during 2019 and 2020, we had 328 contacts that were made to the team, and that resulted in 36 compliments and 175 complaints being recorded. So you'll see a disparity. There is a number of contacts that didn't proceed, and the reasons for that is often, as I've just said there, that the complaints unit can be the first port of call if people are trying to find out information, or if they're trying to raise issues in relation to other services inquiries. So the complaints unit can do a lot of work in relation to inquiries that actually don't lead to a complaint. So the main highlights from the report is that there's been a real focus in this reporting period from the previous years on the use of an early resolution approach to resolve complaints. So the approach is that if complainants are wanting to make a complaint and they're happy for us to focus on achieving an outcome, then we will respond to that complaint outside of the statutory complaints procedure. So it wouldn't be considered under stage 1 or stage 2. We would deal with it under what we call early resolution. We still have a time scale, so there's no drift and delay. So we would still work to 10 working day time scale. But the view is that this approach goes hand in hand with restorative practice. We have just recruited this year another complaints manager. They haven't started yet. We hope that they'll be able to start early next year. But the view is that they will be able to help develop the team and develop the unit to improve the early resolution offer of complaints in line with restorative practice, as well as we want to raise the profile of complaints in a positive manner. So we hope that with the addition of this new worker that we'll be able to do that. So in terms of compliments, the unit has received a 50% increase in compliments since the previous reporting year. It is important to note, though, that compliments that are received by the unit, it's not really an accurate reflection of the compliments that are actually received in children's services, because lots and lots of compliments are received that aren't passed on directly to workers and teams, that are passed on to them, but without the unit being made aware. But there has been more of a push for the compliments to come through the compliments and complaints unit so they can be recorded. So I think that accounts for the increase. So I'm going to page 97. So if we have a look, page 99, we have a look at a closer look at the complaints that have been dealt with as early resolution. So you'll see in 2019-20 in this reporting period, we've had 75% of the complaints were dealt with that and resolved under this process. So as I've said before, that the shifting figures from the previous years, it shows the efforts of the unit and the service as well to try to resolve things as soon as possible for the complainant. And then you'll see that in terms of the complaints that were dealt with at the early resolution, page 99 shows a breakdown of who is making the complaints. You'll see that parents make up 50% of contacts, and the majority of the complaints that come from young people do come via the children's rights team, and I'll talk a little bit more about the complaints from children and young people now. So if you have a look at page 101, that details complaints from young people that were dealt with at an early resolution. So we have 29 that were raised by young people at this level. So all the complaints that were made by children and young people at this stage were resolved to the satisfaction of the young person. They didn't require escalation, so we didn't need to take them to stage 1 or through our complaints process. Now, I manage the complaints unit, but I also manage the Children's Rights Service, and what that does is that really helps the complaints unit and the Children's Rights Service to work really closely together and work hand in hand when children's rights are supporting a young person to make a complaint. So the complaints unit, we welcome complaints from young people. We want children to be able to complain. We want them to be able to make their voice heard. And as a unit, we go above and beyond to make sure that their complaints are responded to in a timely manner. So, you know, we actually aim, although we can have 20 working days to respond, as a maximum, we aim to respond to all children and young people within 10 working days. And I'm often a bit of a go-between between Children's Rights Service and Complaints Unit as well to make sure that things are resolved. So you'll see from the table on page 102 that lots of the issues raised by young people, and just expanding a little bit on what Mel said, they around a delay or in a failure to provide a service or around effective communication. Expanding on what Mel said, a lot of the complaints from young people are around the placement and the family time, but the second highest number of complaints relates to financial issues where a young person hasn't agreed with the local authority over how much money they should receive or how the money should be spent. Although these complaints were all resolved to satisfaction, I just wanted to point out that it's not always possible for us to achieve the outcome that a young person wants. You know, some decisions are made by services based on assessments, and sometimes that isn't always the same outcome as the child or young person wants. But the complaints unit do work really closely with the service to make sure that young people understand why decisions have been made, and we always try to make sure and support the service that there's been a face-to-face meeting, or in COVID times, albeit a virtual meeting, and there's been some conversations and some contacts about that. So even if the young person hasn't got the outcome that they want, that they've been communicated really clearly in terms of why that decision has been made. So I'll move briefly now just to talk over the stage 1 complaint. So on page 103, you'll see that 18 complaints were registered at stage 1, and as I said earlier, that is a huge reduction. So it's approximately 75% less than the previous year, and it's just evidence really of the effort that's been made to try to resolve complaints at the complainant satisfaction at the early resolution stage. So 70% of the stage 1 complaints came from parents who've been involved with children's social care, and there's been a drop in the number of complaints received from young people, which ties in with us trying to resolve young people's complaints at an early resolution stage. In terms of the complaints that were received in a stage 1, most of the complaints relate to the children's social care assessment and intervention teams and the looked after and care leavers teams. Now, it's not unusual because they're the teams that are involved with families and children and young people at a time of change. So that's not unusual that those will be the areas that have received most contact about. And the issues, again, are around mostly communication issues and around service provision. If I move on to the stage 2 and 3 complaints, so that's on page 107. So we have very few stage 2 and stage 3 complaints each year. Now, the way the complaint process works is the complaint starts at early resolution and it would ultimately work its way up the complaints process. And the complaints unit will do everything possible to make sure that that complaint, doesn't escalate. We will want to try to work with the complainant to make sure that it's resolved, and even if it's not to their satisfaction, that they understand why. And the level of complaints that are at stage 2 and 3, they do remain low, and you'll see that they have remained low throughout the years in terms of the comparison. So none of the complaints at stage 2 or the one at stage 3 were from children and young people. And we would absolutely not want to take or want children and young people's complaints to be escalating to stage 2. We would want to do what we could to make sure that it was resolved before that. So we had 3 complaints out of 18 that were stage 1 that went to stage 2. And then we only had 1 complaint at stage 3. Now, stage 3 is a review panel hearing, and the stage 3 complaint was a very complex complaint which related to a number of different service areas, and notably separate elements of the complaint were upheld, partially upheld and not upheld. So whilst it got to stage 3, not all elements of the complaint were actually upheld. I'll move on then in terms of the local government ombudsman. So the ombudsman oversee the complaints and the work of the complaints unit and can be referred to at any time, but they make the decision if they want then for something to be pursued. And again, very few complaints were considered by the local ombudsman during this reporting period. So, and of those that were referred, only 2 of them actually proceeded to investigation. In terms of response times, page 108 and 109 detail the response time to complaints. So you'll see that 100% of stage 1 complaints from children and young people were responded to within the statutory timescale of 20 working days. And again, we always try to work to actually a shorter timescale of 10 working days with children and young people. So in terms of our present position, which is at the end of the report, as I've said earlier, we're recruiting to a full-time complaints manager, which we hope then can really be done to develop the team, particularly the early resolution and restorative practice approach to resolving complaints. We also want to make sure that there's more of a focus on the voice of the child and that we have our complaints team work more with our learning and development department to improve the feedback loop in terms of the learning from complaints to then improve the service outcomes. Again, it really helps that I'm the manager of the children's rights team so that I can try to help that bridge in terms of issues that the advocates raise that then come through to be a complaint to make sure that we're getting an outcome and hopefully a positive outcome as soon as possible for those children and young people. So I think that's it in terms of the highlights, but I know I've whizzed through some of that. So if any of you got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions or comments, colleagues? Tom?
Yeah, I just think thanks Anna for that comprehensive report. I just think it's really positive that we resolved the majority of our complaints at stage 1, and again it's something that we don't talk about a lot, but the amount of work that goes on to do that is really positive. So I just wanted to reiterate that, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. I
absolutely agree with that comment. I must admit, you've made me feel a little guilty, Anna, around compliments, because I certainly have sent compliments to individual people, officers, and it never occurred to me to go through the route of this system at all.
Oh,
So,
well, please email children's complaints. It's really important that we get them captured, because we, like I said, one of the things we want to develop is working more closely with Learning and Development Department with our complaints, but also compliments. If things are going well, we also need to, report on them. And if we can learn from them and promote that and use that as well within other practice areas or service areas, we need to do that. So yeah, please send them through to children's complaints.
I've done some individually direct, but I assume we still have it. The high five thing, does that automatically come to the service?
It doesn't come to us, no.
Oh Lord, I've done that as well. My apologies. I'll try and do better, Anna.
Thank you.
Julie, you've got your hand up.
I think it's just to reiterate what's been said, really. We get an awful lot of compliments through, and I think the very nature of the service is complaints, which comes first. And I know that I certainly and other colleagues encourage that if I see a compliment that we do, forward that on. But I think the more we promote that within all service areas and with everybody, really would help that situation. Because like I said, it's a shame that things are not seen, because
right,
as I say, we do get quite a number.
Yeah, absolutely.
The team did change its name actually last year from just being the complaints team to the compliments and complaints team, and compliments was deliberately put first as well.
And we've been ignoring it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much for that report. Thank you as well to Mel. Let me move on to item 13, please, which is a verbal update from you, Tom, on Ofsted and the Improvement Board.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Kendrick. Yeah, I mean, I think last time we reiterated that obviously the improvement notice had been lifted through the work with the DFE and Leeds, which was really positive. It's just for the board to know that we're starting the process of widening out the remit of the improvement board and thinking about what we call that moving forward. So, we want it to include SEND improvement, social care improvement, learning improvement. And at the last board, we drafted a new membership in terms of reference around that. So that process will start. It's also worth noting for the board that when we were going to go into tier 3 restrictions, which obviously we didn't do, the one of the results of as a result of that would be that we wouldn't have an inspection or an assurance visit while you were in tier 3. So it'll be interesting to find out what if that the national lockdown supports that process. And also just to note for board members that we've got our annual conversation with Ofsted, which we have every year on the 4th of December. So last year, me, Elaine, Joe and Mel went to York, which obviously we won't be doing this year. I'm presuming we'll be doing it virtually. So that's upcoming, and as one of the agenda items, we'll cover what the focus would be for the next inspection visit, etc. So I think we'll probably know more after the 4th of December. But apart from that, Councillor Kendrick, I don't think there's a great deal to update from the Improvement Board.
No, apart from the discussion about changing its name, but I don't think we've agreed on anything particularly, have we? Oh.
No. I think there's been a lot of things discussed, like the Getting to Good board, but I think people, remember that from the past. Those of us who've been around a long time remember the improvement journey, and it's I think it's something about obviously our aspirations to become outstanding, and it's something that kind of encapsulates that, but also it's clear that it's wider than just social care. So I think it's one of these things we need to sort out rapidly, but we need to name it. It needs the right name, doesn't it?
It does indeed. So anybody, any questions or comments about the Improvement Board? Not seeing anything. Right then, if we could move on to item 14, updates from board members on interactions with services. And I don't know how many board members are here now with us. Richard, you're here, Councillor Richard Smith. Have you any particular interactions with Children's Services to report?
No, I don't think I have, to be honest. No, I feel like I should have, but no, I've not got anything to report. Sorry.
Okay, no, don't apologise. It's as such. Barry, do you want to comment on anything? Apart from you're on mute.
Yeah, I know we received that letter yesterday from Tom, and we are in exceptional circumstances here. And I know from the KFN Facebook site, we're getting a lot of complaints from foster carers who are being told that there will be contact. And then we're told that social workers will be coming to the house. Now, is that child social worker or social worker for the foster carer? Because that doesn't give it explicit in that letter.
Yeah, sorry, Barry. I mean, one of the discussions, Julie will come in, I think, and pick it up. One of the discussions me and Julie were having is about how we rationalise the visits between children's social workers and supervising social workers. So I don't know, Julie, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, Barry, yeah, understandably that we don't want to, to double up on things. And we know that, supervising social worker has their role and the children's social worker has their role. But what I'm trying to do at the moment with having oversight of the children care service and the fostering service, I've been meeting with the service manager to look at how we sort of cut down the footfall so that the social work visits are not one for the child and one for the foster care, that we can look at how we do that together. So we are working at that at this moment in time, and appreciate it is difficult for everybody, and just reassurances that we're looking at, that the risk assessments are in place, that we're doing everything in the safest way possible, that PPE is available for all social workers, and that contact is made prior to any face-to-face visits being made. So obviously things happen very quickly on Friday, then into Saturday. So I spent a lot of time in different meetings yesterday where we're looking at how we do this in the next 4 weeks. And obviously we will communicate as things, that as we move and things change. I appreciate it's difficult, but it feels a little bit as if we've gone right back to the beginning when we first went into lockdown and everybody was really, really busy in trying to make sure that we have risk assessments in place. So we're in a better position now because obviously we've had that experience. But at the minute we are working on that. As I say, I spent a lot of time and I've got further meetings today for further discussions.
It's just that contact, I know contact's a big issue with foster carers. I've had a lot with that, and it is because we can't meet our families.
I understand that,
but we've got to allow them to go to parents. Are they tracked and traced?
I understand the difficulties with that, and I think we covered that, Tom, as part of the letter, because again, these are our vulnerable children.
I went through the Children's Act and I went through the social services, and I couldn't find anything that would really is relevant to this particular problem we've got now with COVID.
Yeah, I think the guidance. Sorry, Julie. The guidance.
Tom. No, you go.
I'll cover the guidance. So the guidance, Barry, is the DFE guidance, and we can get it sent around. I think there was a link. I wasn't sure whether there was a link.
Yeah, you sent a link. Yes.
So that on the 15th makes it really clear that there's exemptions. So I appreciate it's really difficult, isn't it? Because the government are saying that this is what the general populace needs to do, but what it doesn't do is say the exemptions underneath around looked after children, the need to see looked after children. So we appreciate it's really confusing, and Julie's probably going to go on to say this, but my understanding of contact, I always forget the name of the place. Noel's House. Is that's been done and managed in a socially distanced way, so that that should minimise that risk. But I'm sure Julie will pick up on the detail.
Yeah, I mean, certainly yesterday, in our conversations yesterday, as of yesterday, Noel House continues to remain open. We, for family time, right? It's very confusing because we got it family time now and contact. So there's two things really happening here: the face-to-face contact and the family time as well. We're managing, and again, it's about having risk assessments in place in order to facilitate that, Barry, and conversations. Really, the important bit, the messages that we're getting out there, the importance of communication between children's services, between foster carers, in other environments. We have, family carers and residential carers. So, but I can only offer assurances that everything that we do, we have support from our public health colleagues, that we are doing what is currently within the guidance. And again, that might change, and I think potentially we're expecting there to be some changes as the week progresses. And it's about how we adapt to those changes and how we make sure that we communicate effectively with all of you.
I do appreciate that Noel's House, it's great that they've set up everything, but it still doesn't. The foster carers are concerned that the parents go to the Noel's House. If they've got any COVID symptoms and pass it on to the child, then it's coming back to the foster carer.
And I can understand that.
And that's the biggest thing that is really concerning foster carers at the moment with this family time contact.
Perhaps that could be taken up with public health colleagues as an issue, because it is a genuine anxiety. That I know you've got your hand up, and I don't know if you're wanting to help explore this a bit further.
Just to say that a part of my role is I link in with the family courts and the judges. And it has been an ongoing push from the family courts for the local authority to maintain contact. And I know there's been lots of difficult conversations within court and with judges around the balancing act of, the risk versus face-to-face contact. But certainly in Kirklees and the other authorities within West Yorkshire, I know from speaking to them that there is a push from the courts and from the judges that local authorities are doing what they can during court proceedings to make sure that, children and young people are seeing their families. So I know that there is a pressure coming from the courts as well, just to sort of expand on where that's coming from, really.
Oh, yes, I understand that, because being a magistrate, I see judges, so they do tell me that if it's a court order, then you're stuck. I don't know what you can do, but it is a real concern with foster carers at the moment.
Yeah,
and I don't think that's related to judges.
I don't know what you're coming in to say, Tom, but my view is that really there should be a conversation with public health colleagues about what can be done to ensure that infection isn't coming from the family that are being attending the family time and coming back to foster carers' homes, because I can imagine why that's a big anxiety. But Tom, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, we are dealing with this continually through our input with KFN, and we have Councillor Kendrick taken advice already from public health, but we'll go back and revisit that. I think part of the issue as well is a bit of a, it's not just about guidance or the courts, it's a bit of a moral issue, isn't it? About children, if particularly they were going into proceedings and, you're just about to have your children removed from you, actually making sure there's contact there. So it's trying to balance that risk, because we completely appreciate our foster carers and feel and understand around that, and we'll continue to explore things that we can do around that. And the other thing that's really interesting, which we didn't send out in a letter, it's a bit complicated and would have complicated the letter a bit, is defining what a contact is. So, for example, when we talk about reducing our contacts in COVID, a contact is defined, and that definition of contact is quite tightly defined. So, for example, a contact would be with being within 2 meters of people, with being in a car with someone else for a prolonged period of time. And some of that would help some of the ways that we look at this, I think. So we'll have a look at it again.
If you could send out the definitives to foster carers, so we can see in black and white what we can do, what we can't do.
Yeah, I think it's important to try and do whatever can be done, work on this. And I absolutely understand the need for that sort of family time, that contact. But actually, it won't do us any good as an organisation and as an authority if we have a lot of foster carers become ill and unable to care. And, it's a balance between the two, isn't it, really? Anyway, thank you for that, Barry.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Smith's had to leave for another meeting now. Just in terms of feedback from me, besides attending the improvement board and general meetings around children's services, I also go to the West Yorkshire, Yorkshire and Humber Lead Member Network, and the other week we were entertained by Tom, came along with Lisa to do some work for us on foster care, which was very well received actually, and lots of colleagues across the region have been very complimentary. Don't let them headhunt you, Tom.
No, I'll try not to.
Okay. And it was glossed over a little bit, I think, by Mel in some ways, but I did, like many, attend the Achieve Awards for our young people's achievements, which was obviously online, and sad that it couldn't be a big party and a big event, but was, an event that celebrated their success as such. I attended a safeguarding event on child sexual abuse and violence recently, and also the ambition event that we had on our offer for send offer as such. And most recently I attended a webinar run by the Local Government Association on planning for early years and post-COVID or the future. The slides have arrived today, and I have sent them on to Mel and I think possibly you, Tom. I don't know who else I sent them to, but anyway, so that's about my feedback. Julie, you've got your hand up and you're wanting to comment.
I just want to comment on the Achieve Awards, Councillor Kendrick, if that's
Fine.
okay.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
For me, I mean, it was a good event. I missed it terribly because I've been in the service for a long time now, and not to actually be able to congratulate on face to face, see our young people. Thinking back to the event we had at the town hall last year and how fantastic that was. But I think the positive thing about a virtual event as such, if there is anything positive, that on the night, I think the numbers were quite low of people actually that came to the event, but it happened. But because it was a recording, because it was YouTube, what we've seen since, and I think Councillor Kendrick, I did send you the email the other day just in terms of the information from our IT department, that we've had a lot of people that have looked after young people that have looked at it afterwards. So, albeit it wasn't on the night, I think that was pleasing to know that lots and lots of I'm not very good at IT terminology. Is it streamlined into it or something like that? I'm not sure, but lots and lots of young people have looked at it later. I'm looking at Tom. I was thinking of an IT word, or Anna maybe, that can help with a better
I was going to say,
word.
I'm getting a bit older. And Anna's probably the youngest of us. I don't know. Anna will probably have the right IT word.
I'm not very IT savvy either.
So,
everybody's putting their hands up. Yeah, it was a good event, and it's good to hear that more young people have looked at the recording subsequently. Just sad that we can't have proper parties and proper celebrations, but I know at the other side of COVID there is intention for us to party a bit. Right, thank you very much. Can we move on to the very last item, which is the agenda plan, which are on pages. Well, the relevant one is the next meeting, which is due on page 118. That looks a very full agenda. I wonder if that will slim down when we get near the date. If there are any items that people feel should be on the agenda plan that aren't on the future dates as such. Tom, is your hand up for that?
Yeah, sorry, it was just, I don't know if you've got any other business item after it, Councillor Kendrick.
I can.
Yeah, sorry, it's just I've got one item.
All right. So, in the interest of moving us on, are we all relatively happy with the agenda plan, on the understanding that some of it, certainly the January one, may well slim down somewhat because I don't think I've got 6 hours of my life to give to that big agenda, but we'll work on that. Okay, thank you. So any other business then, Tom?
Yeah, it was just to say, and it's for Lee and board members, most of you will probably be aware that Steve Coombs moved on for personal reasons. So he left the authority last week. So it's just to update board membership, Lee, as a member. And, I'll have a discussion with you about the replacement. Who's most appropriate to replace Steve at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Tom. Has anybody got any other business? No, I'm not seeing it. You're too slow raising your hands if you have now. Can I say the date of the next meeting is the 13th of January 2021. Doesn't that sound odd? I'm always the same every time a year changes. 13th of January 2021. Can I just say thank you very much to all those people who presented reports. Thank you very much to those who contributed and all of you for attending. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye.